the video. And yes, I mean my old back background because I came back to my room and I have to be here right now. And I'm still trying to figure out what is the best place for me to record. I tried to record two videos on that previous ones, but I thought it was really dark and I was not liking the final result. So I'm here again, but I hate to be here because I have to be, holding my microphone and it's a bit tired. But anyway, I don't think it is aesthetic as well. But that's what we have for today. I'm planning to make a real good video this Tuesday, but I still have to write a script for that. And last week we couldn't have two videos because not because I haven't recorded the second one, but because I didn't like the final result of the video. I didn't feel safe to post the video because it is a controversial subject, and I was like, man, I don't want to get into that. Even though the video I liked it, but I wasn't secure about posting it, so I ended up giving up. I was very busy at the final of that week because I had some exams to do, so I was a bit busy. But now I'm a bit more free, just a little bit. And I decided to talk about because in this meantime I was thinking about a lot of things. And I decided to talk about mature, the act of getting mature, maturing, getting old and getting wiser. And I started to think about it because I decided to watch such a old TV show called Boys Meet the World. I watched the second version, which is Girls Meet the World, and I really liked the TV show when I was a kid. When when I was a kid, but was always curious about how were the original version like, but I couldn't watch because since it was a bit old, it wasn't aired anymore. And I recently signed Disney Plus and it's there. And I decided to watch there. And I finally could, after, like 30 years, watch the original version. And I'm kind of enjoying it. I have to admit, I liked the first season more than the following ones, but I'm keep watching it and I will watch some episodes right now after I record the video while I'm doing my workout. But uh I started to think about how that preteens, that teenage were so different from mine. How the 90s teenage were different from the 2010 teenage because I were a teenage in 2016, around 2016 and 2021. It was my teenage rage, basically. And my God, my experiences were completely different. Of course, we have to consider that my teenage were in a different country. It wasn't in the United States, of course. Different times, a lot of technology that weren't available in the 90s. Also, my environment, because as I said previously, I was raised in a religious environment and I studied in a religious school, so of course it will affect my way of seeing life. But I have a relationship with people around my age who lived in different situations. So I will based on that. I also watch a lot of creators around my age. So I see that even though we had different lifestyles, they're not so different because we're both from the same generation. And for me, watching that TV show was pretty clear to me why the previous generations before Gen Z, which is my generation, they were they were they could achieve many things sooner than us. And of course, we can consider the economic, the inflation, and all. I study business, so we study a lot about it, but I don't want to get into that. I want to actually compare these generations and how, even though the economy right now is not the best one, also our behavior does not lead us to this kind of nature, you know? So I'll start with, as I said, I liked the first season much more than the following ones because the first season were much more focused on Corey's relationship with his family, with his friends, and dealing with things that once we start getting old, you have to deal with. Dealing with responsibility, dealing with of you assuming your mistakes and the the cons of it basically. And I liked it. I like it because of course we passed through this transition of understanding that the word is not comfortable for us anymore and we have to adapt to it. Understanding how people around us feel, understanding what it's like to be an adult, and of course, with a great humor, humor in it. But once we start getting into the following seasons, it was much more about girls reaching out girls, and every episode was about it. The boys reaching out girls. And girls, I didn't like the way girls were treated on the series. I think didn't have so much of personality. So that's why I think Girls Meet the World is much better in this detail. I think the humor in Boys Meet the World is much better, but when it comes to the way they treat girls, Meets the World is 100 times better than Boys Meet the World because, as I said, they're girls, they are NPCs basically, and the guys are acting like I need to take this girl, and they're so dumb that they simply accept. They don't think. They only accept everything, and I don't like it so much. But uh, when I was watching it, I started to remember my cousins when I were a kid because I have really old cousins. Like my oldest cousin, she's 20 years older than I. When I was born, she was 20 years old, basically the age I'm right now. So it's a bit bizarre for some people, but my family is extremely weird. And I remember that in my age, this cousin of mine, she already had a baby, she already have a house, she already have a car, and of course, she found some weird ways to get that, but it's about mindset. They were much more in this mature lifestyle focused, and my other cousins did the same. They graduated from high school, they found a job and they started to work even though they still lived with their parents because they lived with their parents. They acted more like adults than me and my cousins who are around my age. They were much more mature than us now. I, s- I feel like a teenager compared to them when I were a when they were adults, young adults. So they were like that. They wanted to find a job, they wanted to buy a car, they wanted to have this. They wanted to have relationships. And I see that in my case when we were not like that. I see that many people around my generation, they're like, they want to buy things. They don't want to buy a car. They don't want to buy a house because they think, no, it's not the right time for that. And of course, there will be exceptions, but as the proper name said, exceptions. They're exceptions. They are not the rule. Most part of people around my age, we're still trying to figure out what is our place on earth, you know? And as I said, when I looked at my cousins when I were a kid and they were young adults, when they were the same age as I, they seemed much more mature to me because, as I said, they were already building a family. They were already buying car, buying a house. They were, you know, managing a house while I'm here. I'm not. And even when I compare it to Gen Z who already live alone, Gen Z that they have their own houses, even though it's for rent, it's not a problem. Um, they still act like teenagers. For example, for us, it's much more important to buy a gamer PC, a setup, than actually buy a house, actually buy a car. And maybe because we're a bit pessimist, we think that we will never get that. We think that it's not accessible for us. So why should we give a try? You know? And it's kind of problematic, but I see that it's such a different way of seeing life. And then I was watching Boy Meets World. I started noticing it. How the way they act, how the way they behave in that society is different from how my generation behaved and how it led us to different futures. And of course, I think Gen Z will change. I think we will learn, but we are learning through different ways. I think we're much more emotionally smarter than the previous generation. I think we're much more cautious. We are much more aware of the things our mistakes can make. And as I said here previously, I'm not talking about exceptions, I'm talking about the general one. you know I think that we are living in different ways, but we are achieving things that they couldn't achieve back in their age. But we are built late when it comes to material achievements. So basically, that's the video. It's a short video because I'm planning something better for Thursday, and I hope to see you there. Okay, so bye.